Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for coming back for another podcast. I'm Valerie, that's David, and this is Gen X Pittsburgh. Tonight's guest is Bill Peduto, former mayor of Pittsburgh and fellow Gen Xer. We'll be chatting politics, going undercover, and wrestling.
That's right, Valerie.
Okay, I can't wait.
But before we talk about wrestling, let's talk about music for a minute.
Okay,
Did you watch the Grammys?
I did.
Did you see The Cure won a Grammy?
I know.
The first time in they've been around 30 plus years, the first time they ever won a Grammy.
I love it. I love it.
Gen X representing.
Yeah, for sure.
And it was the only representation of Gen X.
I was just going to say, I think that was probably about it.
Sadly, there were some people who died. I think they were Gen X, but for the most part, my son had to tell me who everybody else was.
I didn't know a lot of those bands and the performers, but I did notice Youngblood. Oh my gosh, what a cutie he is. And I love his music.
We will agree to disagree, Valerie.
You know what? I like a good rock band. I like a good heavy metal. I think it's on its way back.
You know what? I like a good rock band too, which is why I'm not into Youngblood.
Oh my God. All right. Well, we got Bill Peduto waiting in the wings. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, he'll be joining us. Stick around. Where do Pittsburghers go to make a good night even better? Con Alma in downtown Pittsburgh, where the lights stay low, the jazz speaks for itself, and the kitchen is on point. Come early and stay late, and let the night do the rest. That's Con Alma, downtown Pittsburgh.
It rises from the mist. It's back. Your favorite independent publication dedicated to fantastic films. Drive-In Asylum. Brand new issue number 27. Piranha. Werewolves. Gremlins. It must be Joe Dante, the one and only. James L. Conway, who once unleashed the Boogans. And also the queen of Fulci's Living Dead trilogy, Catriona McCall. Plus, film reviews and commentary and newsprint images designed to transport you to an ancient era of newspaper advertising. Yes, the lurid images have returned. Go to groovydoom.etsy.com or go to Strange Vice or Forbidden Planet New York to purchase Drive-In Asylum, your fantastic film connection. To avoid fainting, keep repeating. It's only a fanzine, only a fanzine, only a fanzine, only a fanzine.
Welcome back to Gen X Pittsburgh Podcast. We are here with Mayor Bill Peduto and Pat Clark, and we're going to be talking about politics in the 90s, wrestling, music. What else, Valerie?
Lots of stuff. Going undercover. I can't wait to hear about that.
Right.
I swear I turned on the TV one day and I was like, I'm looking and I'm like, no. No.
Well, you're not,
you're not supposed to
you
know.
weren't supposed to recognize them,
I know,
right?
But I could, there was something about you.
Right.
I think I know who that is.
Right. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of the interview, the first question I think we need to talk about is the beard. Right? When you were the mayor, you didn't have a beard. You got it pretty quickly afterwards, right? I mean, what made you decide to do that? And are you happy with it? Is this a style that you like?
First off, this is real. So people are like, well, how come your beard's gray and your hair is dark? And in fact, I had the opportunity to meet the Dalai Lama twice. And the first time I met him, he grabbed me by this and he goes, "This is black. This is white." So that's the way God made me.
Mocked by the Dalai Lama.
Wow. It's distinction.
Yeah. So I think I grew it in 16 or 17, somewhere around then. And I might have trimmed it once since then, or shaved it off. I just like it, and I feel that it's become a part of me. And having the two-tone sort of makes it where people who don't know me are like, did you used to be the mayor?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's become part of me.
Yeah, it's so funny. My wife was the one that pointed it out, and I don't even think of you now without the beard.
Right.
It's just part of you.
When people who have only known me with the beard see the pictures without the beard, they have a hard time believing that's me.
Yeah, yeah. So you see this as the sort of hard-hitting political show that we do, right? We have the
Yeah.
mayor sitting in front of us, and here we are talking about beards, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you are such a city guy
Mhm.
that it's hard to believe that you grew up in the South Hills of Pittsburgh. What was that like?
Oh, it was wonderful. In fact, I'm the first mayor, I think, in over 120 years that was not born within the city's borders. And since that time, both Ed Gainey and Corey O'Connor are both born in the city.
Right.
So it's something that's an anomaly. But my childhood was fantastic. I grew up in Scott Township in the middle of a middle-class neighborhood. My next door neighbor was William Penn.
Oh.
And the Penn girls for four girls, and I grew up with three brothers, 4 boys, and just it was the melting pot of all of these different folks who left city neighborhoods or decided to do the 1950s experiment of the suburbs. So I was very blessed and had a great childhood. My grandmother was the last person to live in the city. She was born in Homewood and raised there. And I was the first to move back.
Wow. Wow.
Where did you hang out? What did you do when you were coming up on those teenage
Was there anywhere to
years?
hang out?
Well, yeah, I mean, we hung out in backyards and the cemetery down the street and at Foxcroft School and in the street playing street hockey. But the folks that lived in my backyard, catty corner to my house, their dad played for the Penguins. So Lowell McDonald, yeah. And we recently lost Lowell in January, but Lowell Jr. was one of my best friends growing up. His brother Lane was a year below us. Lane won the Hobie Baker Award. That's the Heisman Trophy for hockey. He played on the '88 Olympic team, was drafted into the NHL, but had concussions. And during my summers, after we lost Roberto, the Clemente family moved down the street, and I played Little League with Roberto Jr., and I am friends with him to this day.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's
So
amazing.
it was a charmed childhood.
Yeah, I had no idea that they lived in the.
Yeah, so there was a little street called Orchard Spring where several of the houses were rent. So in the winters, Bobby Walden, the punter for the Steelers, was renting the house, and in the summers, it was the Clementes. Tony Dungy lived on that street.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Scott
again,
Township, the place to be.
yeah, but
I'd never
it was
guessed.
not in any way affluent. It was just working class.
There's a piece
And-
of Penn Hills like that, where Willie Stargell, Little Loud,
yeah, no,
because
it's
he could.
right, right.
Right. Yes.
And that's a big key of it too. You know, I'm not going to say that growing up in the 70s and the South Hills didn't have its own level of prejudice, but at that same time, you know, when you're a Steeler or the family of a pirate, people, especially in a middle class neighborhood, sometimes become more welcome.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have to admit, I was pretty excited when I was looking up. I want to say, first of all, that, I've interviewed you a few times, obviously, for people who don't know. But it's always been pretty buttoned down, pretty official sort of things, right? So I did a little bit of research on you before I knew we were going to do this interview. And I was very excited to find out that you had dropped out of college, because I did the same. And then you
wasn't
blew it
excited.
for me.
What's
Yeah, I'm sure,
wrong with
right?
you
But then you blew it for me because I saw that you went back and you actually got a master's, right? So
That's the only regret I have in life, is that I didn't do that before my dad passed,
okay.
because it meant more to him than it did to me.
Yeah, ditto.
But, I went through 2 universities, 5 or 6 majors. I can't even remember how many. I left Penn State with over 153 credits
Yeah.
and 124 needed for a diploma. But I had 3 courses to take. And that summer I took one, And then I like to joke that I graduated in just 6 terms. Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush.
Yeah.
Bush.
Yeah.
And it was, the last 2 courses was a freshman level history course,
You sure?
right?
By then you were old enough, you kind of been in history.
So, but then I had to take a 400 level political science course, but Penn State didn't offer any 400 level online.
Yeah.
And so it's like, what am I going to do if I'm going to get this degree? And they allowed me to take a first year law school class.
Okay.
So through Penn State's campus in Harrisburg, I took a first year legal writing course for law school,
Wow.
and aced it.
Wow.
So got my diploma in the mail,
Yeah.
put it back in its envelope, took it home to my mom, and said, "You deserve this more than I did."
Yeah.
And then a buddy of mine, David Miller from the University of Pittsburgh, who worked for the Murphy administration as the budget director, we became friends over the city's looming financial crisis. He took me to lunch and he said, "So I want you to come to Gispia and earn your master's now that you have your bachelor's." And I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I'm never going into a classroom again. And he convinced me of one thing. He said, "Take my course, one course. And if you like it, stay in the school. And if you don't, then that's it."
What?
And yeah, I earned my master's degree shortly after getting that piece of paper.
What motivated you to get into politics, to really stay this hyper focused on the city and on just trying to figure out the best way to serve the community?
So, a couple things. Number one, dark secret, I'm a baby boomer like Pat because I was born 1964.
That's true.
Right.
Right on the cusp.
Right. I think
64, 46 to 64. But all of my friends and everything that I grew up with is X.
yeah.
And
All these young people, I don't know how, like we.
I'm a man without a generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I always said that,
Without a generation.
like, anybody born in the 60s, they were a little bit too young to be the same age as Seinfeld and a little bit too old to be the same age as Friends.
Right.
You know, it's
Right. I
like
do know.
we didn't have the Beatles or whatever. We had like REM, right?
Right.
It's
Al
like,
cuts it off at MTV. Did you grow up with MTV? Then like, no, like we're the old ones.
yeah, no. So I did, and not only that, but Robbie Civittini, who lived in South Fayette, got MTV 2 years before we did. So we would drive out to South Fayette before, when it was all farmland, to be able to watch our MTV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a big thing back then. The thing about Pittsburgh, I think it's part family. Having my grandfather raise me in the house, who came from Italy. He was born in 1893, fought in World War I
Oh.
for Italy.
Wow.
Yeah, and had a second grade education, worked 38 years at Columbia Steel in Carnegie. Just this really, and my other grandfather died at J&L on the South Side at the age of 50. And so I felt like, it was in my blood, right?
Yeah.
I had this, and I really felt connected to the city, and I had my family as well. And then there was this watching the city die. All those great things that I told you about in the 70s, 79, I'm starting high school in Chartiers Valley. And by the time I leave in 83, the city of Pittsburgh is in a death knell.
Right.
And it only got worse in the 80s. And I remember telling people when I was at Penn State, I'm going back to Pittsburgh. And nobody was going back to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Everybody who was from Pittsburgh was picking what city they were going to go to. And there were no jobs. And like when Pat came in 1993, East Liberty was the murder capital of Pittsburgh. More murders in that one neighborhood. In fact, I remember Valerie McDonald Roberts, when she was on council, made the TV station stop announcing when they would do the homicide investigations from East Liberty because the detective bureau was there. They couldn't say East Liberty.
I remember that.
And Lawrenceville was a shooting den for heroin, Prostitution, the prostitutes would be on Butler Street in the mornings.
Yeah.
The lines to get in the bars would start at around 8, 9 a.m. In Dresden Way was where dealing of heroin was occurring throughout all of Western Pennsylvania, and people were being shot and killed there on a regular
Yeah.
basis. And you talk to people today and they're like, oh, it's gentrified, it's horrible. Talk to the people who lived there
Right.
in the 90s.
Right.
Talk to the people who lived there at the beginning of the 2000s. It wasn't a place that you wanted to live. It was a place that you ended up.
Right.
And people who worked their entire life working in mills and had their homes in East Liberty or Lawrenceville couldn't sell them.
Right.
And if they did, maybe get $40,000.
Right.
I started at Craigie Mellon in '83 on a full ride Army ROTC scholarship.
Huh?
I taught rappelling off
Yeah,
of
wow.
the old ski bow hall.
Yes.
I was a Ranger cadet that earned my black beret, and I ended up at Penn State traveling around with the Grateful Dead. That was my 80s.
Right.
Wow.
So my 90s was sort of the redemption time to be able to try and,
What's wrong?
yeah, like, what the hell happened? You know, my poor parents, you know, it's
Yeah.
like, so it really was like that time period and that understanding. You couldn't just graduate from college and get a job in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
You had to know somebody. You had to have something. It had to be so specialized. And even at that point, you were going to get paid much more if you left. And so I just wanted to try and make something happen. And in that process, during that decade, I met a bunch of people who felt the same way.
Yeah.
And they saw not what Pittsburgh was at that moment, but what potential it had, which was off the charts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting you say that because I started at Point Park College in 1990. And at the time, I always say there was like one place for college students to go, and that was the racks that was on the Boulevard of the Allies, right? There was nothing, right? But the city was filled with potential, and people were doing things like taking old warehouses and having pop-up art shows there, or concerts, right, in old warehouses in Lawrenceville. So,
And that's what Pat and his partner were doing.
yeah, and so that's why I was very interested when the mayor talked about bringing you in, because it's just so interesting.
Underutilized existing structure. When I came here visiting with my wife from DC, friend was going to get a graduate degree at University of Pittsburgh, kind of in Hall Studies, PhD actually. Smart guy. Driving through town and like we're going past these dead brass manufacturing buildings, and I'm like, do they have lofts in this city? And he turned to me and said, Pat, they don't know what lofts are. It kind of blew my mind. But the thing that was the best, that was a subsequent visit. The first time we came through was actually through Lawrenceville.
Yeah.
Now Larrywood. Butler Avenue, there was a golf pro shop there where you could get like fancy clubs and crap like that.
Really?
And other than that, it was just shitty Butler Street.
Yeah.
And it was just awesome. We drove through there, and it was like one of the first times we came through Pittsburgh, and just loved coming up there to actually visit a pal. But yeah, it made an impression. We came here to visit him 3 times, and on the way back in the truck, one of us turned to the other and said, we should just probably move here for DC. And we did, because like it was undervalued existing infrastructure.
Yeah.
And we couldn't afford the freaking vacant lot in DC. Although if we had, we'd be golden now.
Right.
Yeah, it was economics and thrifting. Pittsburgh, if I can get classist, had the richest middle class in the world in this country. And they started dying, and we visited to see our friend, and we went to Sawmill Run Boulevard, and the fucking thrifting in this town was off the charts. The shit that we would find that is now accumulated, hopefully slowly divested in our home, was insane. Because yeah, there was great stuff in Pittsburgh, and literally we moved here for cheap housing, thrifting, and the fact that like people were shocked when they found out we were moving for no particular reason. It was great. We actually got adverse reaction.
Well,
You're moving to Pittsburgh.
Right.
Was either why? It was either slack-jawed wonderment or why.
yeah, yeah.
And there's a line in a Joe Grusecki song, East Carson Street, where he talks about the thrifting, but he doesn't talk about it as like, wow. It's more like the treasures of our family
Yeah.
Right.
in the thrift shops.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Pittsburgh has always punched above its weight, probably because
Absolutely.
of the railroad barons, right? But I mean, the theater, even throughout the 80s and 90s, when the city was falling apart, like you said, right? It still had amazing theater. It still had sports teams to to beat anybody. It had just an amazing cultural scene that unless you lived here, you had no idea.
And
Right?
that's, I think, with so many who have recently moved here or are so much younger,
Yeah.
like they can't imagine the red light district downtown.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Working for Lieutenant Governor in the 92, 90, and it was still that way.
Yeah.
And prostitution, was just rampant in
Right.
downtown Pittsburgh.
We almost didn't move here.
Because of that.
Jesus, no. Downtown was great. There was like no vacancies. It was like a real downtown. Well, complete with that part.
Well, not Liberty. I mean,
Right.
Liberty was
Sure,
pretty.
that was a tough time.
Yeah.
But when we moved here, it literally was like we moved into a city I hadn't been in for 20 years because downtown, they had a freaking GC Murphy's.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Massive.
Right.
It had a pet department.
That's right.
And a butcher shop.
That's right.
Kaufman's had.
It was freaking insane.
I used to buy my fish at Kaufman.
Yes, right.
And I'm not talking about eating. I mean, my aquarium.
That's right.
They'd have the sale,
Oh, my
10-cent neon tetra.
Right.
And it just load up my bag with all
They-
the fish.
These jagoffs that wanted to do Fifth Forbes, we
Yeah.
walked up the street with them 2 years before they were going to do this thing. We walked past Candy Rama, and I
Yeah.
turned to the
Yeah.
guy who was I don't know if you know CEOs, but they have this expression that they use that I'm not capable of doing. Most people can, but it's like, is it a smile? Or am I going to die now? But they are really good at that shit.
Yeah.
And I turned to this guy and said, you gonna lose this space? And he's like, yeah, that's like 500 feet. Like, that's all. No, this whole area we're tearing down. I'm like, that's Candy Rama. So I haven't been here this long, but I know I don't fuck with Candy Rama.
Yeah.
Not downtown. And they did. It didn't
Right.
work.
Yeah, no, I mean, 1990s downtown was the same as 1970s downtown.
Yeah.
I mean, it was basically the same
Right.
businesses with less jewelers.
Right. Right.
It's the only one industry that sort of
Yeah.
didn't hang around as much. But the thing about the culture, yes, it had all those amenities, but at that same time, that's when the Heinz Endowment started the cultural district.
Right.
And the Cultural Trust was born. And, it was like when you saw Detroit going through bankruptcy, the first thing people said is, sell the artwork. It was like,
Yeah.
Right.
you remember that?
Yeah,
And they did it.
No.
Right.
They're like, no, all this, like Ford Foundation, Kresge, all those guys stepped up.
Right.
Right.
Mott, they're like, no.
And that's exactly what happened in Pittsburgh.
Mhm.
So during all that, the Children's Museum had recently been built, but the Carnegie Science Center, the War Hall, the August Wilson Center, the Cultural Trust, it was a whole different movement. It was like, okay, things are really bad. We're going to double down
Yeah.
on culture, arts,
Yeah.
and education.
Right.
Nobody did that.
Right.
And at the same time, we didn't lose the symphony.
Right.
We didn't lose the ballet. We didn't lose the past treasures from the Gilded Age. And we added to it thinking, well, if the city ever does come back, it's going to be really special.
They
Right.
maintain the real estate. This is important.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's how Pat and I met. So Pat was the guy who was the troublemaker, who was saying Mayor Murphy's idea for Fifth and Forbes was going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It was sort of taken out of the Urban Land Institute's 1980 playbook. And this is how Indianapolis came back and, all these other cities. But the one thing that he mentioned is, Pittsburgh never was a part of that economic spur that people in the 80s and 90s saw. So we never became anywhere USA.
There was no beltway.
Right.
There's no Beltway, but there was also no Panera Bread on every corner next to a Starbucks.
Right.
You still had that neighborhood bakery that represented the ethnicity of that neighborhood
That's right.
100 years ago.
That's right.
And the coffee shop was independently owned.
That's right.
And we sort of missed that
Yeah.
death angel.
Right. Right.
And
Right. Well, it's really
but that would have been a lot different if it wasn't this grassroots movement that occurred in the 90s.
right.
People got pissed off and then used.
But it wasn't built in the 70s or the 80s. It was created from the ground level in the 90s.
Right.
Yeah, and it was interesting because and actually props to Christine Brill, John Klein as well, but Christine did a whole graduate thing on how Ground Zero started. And we actually Arizona State University also did an independent thing. But one of the weird things about it was you and I have talked about this, the base. What does that mean in Arabic? It just means, it's Al Qaeda is the base. It's just all a distributed group of folks doing shit. And weirdly enough, not only were we that when we started this up, we fought Murphy's thing, but we each did weird little projects. Tracy Jackson did Flux, which I was thinking about that coming in here. That there was not a word for pop-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was Flux before that.
Right.
And it was just going into these dead white elephant buildings again.
And
Underutilized existing assets, undervalued assets that were just white elephants.
Yeah, but neighborhoods that people had heard of but never went to.
Right.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there's 12 bands, 40 artists and everything on one night and this entire thing. That was my introduction to Allentown.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there at
Yeah.
the,
Right.
the hostel.
Yeah. That's right. The hostel. That's right.
And the brew house on the south side.
Right. And even the Beehive. I mean,
Yeah.
when you talk about the South Side itself, here's a neighborhood where, like you said, it was families that had been there since time memoriam, right? And the steel industry collapses, and then what are you going to do? And all of a sudden, independent owners come in. They set up a coffee shop. They set up a slacker, and all of a sudden you're getting all the arts kids who were going to be Art Institute and were interested in the brew house space, right? And now you have development going up and down East Carson Street, and all of a sudden the city's taking care of itself in ways that Murphy couldn't,
You
right?
just reminded me of one of my favorite activities, and this goes late 80s, early 90s, was at the Liberty Bell before it became the Lava Lounge. And Friday nights was Frankie.
Frankie Capri.
Don't even.
Frankie.
But Frankie, in the early days, when the old timers from Southside
It was so freaking surreal.
would be doing he'd be doing polkas,
Right.
and they would be dancing, and then the college kids would start coming in,
Yeah.
and the lights would start getting darker, and then you're putting on that sweaty,
Horse head or whatever.
and it's sweat from the previous
was-
person's
Oh, I
That was kind of what did it for us when we moved here.
Well, so that brings me though to the point that you were sort of the first post-industrial mayor, at least in my estimation. You were leading a city that was no longer mired with the steel mills, right? No one was expecting the plants to reopen anymore. All of a sudden, you had a whole new agenda that people were able to embrace. Things like bike lanes, things like turning the brown spaces into something else, right? I mean, what did that feel like? What was the experience?
I think, I remember when we lost Bob O'Connor, and there was this a lot of optimism around Luke Ravensall because of his youth, his age. And so many people really believed that would help to transcend Pittsburgh from being this old town, and people would view us differently because our mayor was young.
Right.
And it's not a knock, but Luke was the youngest member of the old guard.
Yeah.
His family had been steeped in government and politics and leaders in the north side, and connected with Forrester and all the going back.
Right.
And he just happened to be the next generation of it.
What TV show was he on? He was on that TV show He was America's youngest mayor, and he was all like David Letterman or something.
Oh, he
You
was.
are correct.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes.
I was trying to remember that.
I watched that. I remember. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because Sophie, I think, was on one of them as well for
Oh.
being one of the oldest.
And then
mayors.
she was the first person we saw. I saw when I moved here. It was awesome.
Well, you have to explain that. I mean,
So we moved here, had no idea the Pittsburgh Marathon, let alone the next day after we moved here. And I had to get the U-Haul trucks back, or we paid another, I don't know how much.
Right.
And drove my brother like at 4 a.m. or whatever it was down to the train station so he could get back to DC after driving up with me. And then the next morning we had no coffee. We had everything was boxes, which really needed that coffee. So thank God there wasn't just a guy or a store who had coffee. There was a store named Mr. Coffee.
Yeah.
And we went there. Ended up getting a sign eventually, but that's another story. And I'm walking down the street, not realizing that there was a Pittsburgh Marathon that is going to prevent me, but like a lot of angina, a lot of psoriasis. I couldn't get the truck back because of this freaking marathon, and I was like just finding out. And I'm walking down the street, don't yet have coffee. I'm at Don Allen Chevrolet, where I used to be.
Yeah.
Liberty Bomb
Right.
and South Atlantic Avenue, and I look up and a convertible goes past. It's sitting in the back on her butt, like you're supposed to if you're like the mayor or whatever. It's like Sophie Vesloff waiting,
yeah.
and literally was the
That's
first
what she used to
person-
do with every person who decided to move to Pittsburgh.
So awesome. First person I saw moving
Yeah.
to Pittsburgh.
Right.
That's
She was
sign.
very excited.
Yeah.
That and the free beer up on the next year on there at the Bloomfield Bridge. That was just awesome too. But
So going back, the way I look at it is like 1946. That's when things start changing in Pittsburgh and Davy Lawrence and Mellon and the Allegheny Conference in the URA and all of these different things. And I got to see in the 70s as Point State Park gets built and the completion of these different types of dreams. And they build Three Rivers Stadium, they build a new convention center, and they build a new airport. Then they tear all those down to build a new baseball stadiums, new convention center. And now we have new airport. But all of that, I sort of put in one big capsule.
Right.
And I do view what our administration started and what we ended with is the beginning of the next chapter.
Right.
So it isn't a city that is built on manufacturing, whose economy and whose neighborhoods are homogeneous to one ethnicity and where there really aren't bridges for others to be a part. I think that we started to see that emerging as what will be the next Pittsburgh. And that's why we call our administration the next Pittsburgh, which actually was taken at the same time by Tracy for her publication, Next Pittsburgh.
Oh.
So we both had
Right.
like Next Pittsburgh handles on Twitter, and we just coexisted. But the thing about it, it was more, I mean, I like using the example of bike lanes because the bike lanes weren't really about bike lanes. But if you are going to make big change, it requires a cultural shift. And the bike lanes represented a cultural shift. And I think that's why some people were so opposed to them, because they recognized that that was a cultural shift and a tip of the hat to a younger generation that didn't necessarily want to have a car.
Right.
And wanted to be able to utilize public assets the same ways that those who did have a car utilized them. And there were a number of different things that occurred over those 8 years that were a tip to what was going to be and what is now what Pittsburgh is. But I like to view it going back to the 90s and the the decade before I took office is in the mayor's office. The work that I had been doing for 20 years in City Hall.
Yeah.
7 years as a chief of staff, 12 years as a member of council in a district that represented Carlow University, Chatham University, Carnegie Mellon University, the University of Pittsburgh, Presbyterian Hospital, Montefiore Hospital, Children's Hospital, Shadyside Hospital, Hillman Cancer Center, and West Penn. And over that course of 2001 to 2011, where I was in city council, that district grew by 10%.
Yeah.
And the idea was if we could do and replicate, while every other council district lost population,
Yeah.
if we could replicate that on a citywide basis in order to be able to see this new economic engine and the opportunity for people to not only stay, which all of my brothers and almost all of my friends had to leave.
Mhm.
They didn't want to, but they had to. Then we could actually make Pittsburgh a place that would not only be a place where my friends' children could stay, but where their friends who lived in different places in the country would come to.
Yeah.
And we saw that. And we saw in that decade over 30% increase in our Hispanic community, over 30% increase in our Asian community. And we saw the blending of the places in East Liberty that white kids from Shadyside wouldn't go to, being a mixed community of where everybody of a certain age could be, and even some old people would be, and where that would blend back into Walnut Street.
Yeah.
And kids from every neighborhood, where the bars that I used to hang out with, where everyone kind of looked like me, now look like the United Nations.
Right.
And there's at least 3 languages being spoken.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we moved here, like we had a choice of like basically 3 foods. It was Italian, it was German, and it was Polish.
Right.
And we moved here from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We ate so much Ethiopian food, which is still so awesome and still underrepresented here. But like when like the first Vietnamese restaurant opened on Penn Avenue, it was like, gosh,
Sure.
so awesome. It was like a sign.
Yeah.
We've worked on a couple of things, but professionally, which I guess technically you weren't my boss, but you were like the lead client.
Yeah.
We did the Welcoming Pittsburgh plan, which was not only like one of the points of pride, tough project, but like probably one of the most amazing groups of people like I'd ever met. And in 2015, on the way out of the White House, the Obama administration's, welcoming national initiative gave shouts to you.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, yeah. And Betty Cruz, she was really the principal that was working on that. We never had a person that worked on our immigrant refugee community in the mayor's office.
Yeah.
And Betty, somebody who now heads up the World Affairs Council, took it upon herself to work and to meet with all of these groups. So we would have, for the Bhutanese community growing in Carrick, a movie night where the films would be in their own language, so grandma could sit and watch the film as well.
Right.
And just simple little things to large things, but to take away from where Pittsburgh may have had a bad reputation in the past to being very proactive. And why was that really important on this one? Because my grandfather was treated like crap when he came over.
Sure.
He was told to go back.
Absolutely.
And go back where you came from. And in 1923, and he had only been in the country for 2 years, the Ku Klux Klan marched to Carnegie.
Yeah.
And 10,000 Klansmen burnt a 70-foot cross in Carnegie Park, right down the hill from where I grew up. And as they marched across the Glendale Bridge because they had another 70-foot cross that they wanted to burn in front of the Irish Catholic Church. And
Classic.
my grandfather and the other folks got on the bridge. They put a truck across it and they fought the Klan.
Wow.
And from the church tower, somebody shot and killed one of the Klan leaders he was from Washington County, and the Klan turned around. That's the history that I never want to see repeated.
Right.
And that opportunity to be the mayor to work on the Welcoming Pittsburgh campaign and to be able, not just Pat, but so many great folks from around the city, we created a model for other cities to follow. And it's not sanctuary city because we don't control the jails, so we can't, but it sure is a great neighborhood that would make Mr. Rogers proud.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, you ran for mayor several times. And like, why did you keep coming back? And I think you answered
Yeah.
that. I think that's like,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, no, it's the only job that I really ever wanted. And I mean, I never wanted to run for public office, to run for higher public office. And I always said to people, when I was a council member, the only other office that I'd ever run for is mayor. And I jokingly said that after 19 years of watching somebody play the video game, you want to play it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want to be able to have your initiatives. I said before how I met Pat during the Ground Zero,
Mhm.
and Ground Zero brought together amazing creative people. There were artists, there were architects, there were urban planners, Richard Florida, who was part of it.
Doctor.
Dr. Florida, Don Carter. I mean, just, and the age went anywhere from 20 to 70. But it was really people who were civic minded. And it in itself led to a really strong push in good civic engagement at the neighborhood level and a political movement as well. And it took off on two tracks, and Pat stayed focused on that civic side, but also went and got involved in voter engagement, not political, but getting more people engaged in local elections and other things. And I took off on the political side. And there's a whole group of people who are now in positions of power around the city that are the branches of what this started off. And we worked together in 2002 on an initiative called the Gayasuba Fellowship.
Yeah,
And we trained
several years.
how many hundreds?
Yeah, it probably was like over 200 folks, initially small. I crossed paths with Werner Macklin the other day, but just a group of folks that Bill knew or who he found out about that were interested in like doing something. And I guess that was the thing that ran through both that project, but all the other stuff we did was as the Ground Zero, which was, you can't show up at meetings. You got to do some shit. Like, what are you going to do? Like, pick something to do. And we all had, for the most part, we all had something that we did. And like Flux went and took like free beer and bands and friends and artists into a dead building. And like we did stuff around like transit mobility, as they say now. But you had to do stuff.
The ultraviolet loop.
Yeah, and I think that was the whole point of it. Is essentially a lot of people wanted to do something, and like we did this in 2024, and then did some stuff with you too. But it was young voter stuff, and like that year we like focused on asking young voters to vote and to do it based on like what the research said, which is if you want young people to vote, ask them, and don't you or me ask them, their friends, peers, and neighbors ask them.
Yeah.
And that changed like the whole approach for me, because I'd volunteered where they just parachuted me into the Hill District, and men literally would see me coming and say, huh, what year is this? Because y'all are here again.
Right.
It was so shit worthless. But yeah, if you like teach folks how to do it and do it, that year that we did the work in 2024 before you like ran the first time, like in the places, the voting
2004.
districts. Yeah, that's exactly. Like we increased young voter participation there, like I think 25%.
Yeah.
And like it was
Just
just
nobody was doing this. I mean, and
that
nobody
was
was
crazy.
nobody would even talk about an issue for young people. It was simply every Democrat, Republican, didn't matter, 65 and over. they're the only ones that vote, and those are the only issues that matter.
We tried that, didn't work.
So this became a whole new approach that has had the ripple effects of where we are today. And it wasn't only that. I mean, one of my favorite events was the VFW downtown for
Oh, the
punk
bingo
night,
hall.
punk night and bingo.
Yeah, the bingo hall. There was a like one of those bingo halls with the secretaries all went. Do you guys know where
Yeah.
this is? Do you know what
It
this
was
is?
very, yeah.
It's on Forbes Avenue across from the chart
Every
room,
day at
second
lunch,
floor.
just
And, like,
cigarettes
Bingo Ben ran it.
and bingo.
Did I ever tell you Bingo Ben's economic development theory? So this is the guy who ran this like bingo hall. He had a nonprofit, right? Like certain other nonprofits. And he made a go of it. And he got in the middle of this whole Fist Wars controversy. And I would show up there. We would do bingo shows.
But
Mike Devine did like
Well, he did it, but I'm talking about punk night when there was punk bands.
all of that stuff right up in the bingo hall.
Yeah.
It was almost like San Francisco. It was like crazy. But Bingo Ben took me outside one day and he said, Patrick, I'll tell you what, you take this to the mayor because I know you're in with all those guys, Murphy, which I wasn't in with all those guys at all. He said, take this to him. They're fucking idiots. What they need to do, gambling on this side, already got the operation started. Prostitution the other side. Solves everything. And I'm like, this is probably the most classic version of urban development and economic planning that America knows, frankly.
It's, no,
He
no.
didn't get it though, you know.
No,
Sad.
and it wasn't that one event, the punk night, bingo night at that place. It was that, I mean, there was the rave that was sanctioned in that tunnel, the
Right.
Wabash Tunnel.
Right.
Yeah.
that
Totally
occurred.
forgot about that. Do you remember
Yes.
when those kids, when we had like the giant snowstorm the last time, they went down Mount Washington?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That was
Yes.
insane.
Yeah, the
Like, I
videos
totally
were,
forgot
Right.
about that.
right.
yeah,
Right.
no, but there was just this attitude that the people who remained here in the 90s, it was like we were living in this abandoned mansion and we just
Yeah.
would do things and got away with it.
Right.
Or didn't really ask
You
permission.
can go into the empty mills. Like it just blew
Yeah.
my mind. And like when I started doing work in places like Morningside, which is freaking jewel, like 2008, like I'd get like a few people like Grant Irvin and Amy who were like, yeah, this is great. We moved here and everybody's like love and it's all wonderful. And other folks would just like all they would talk about when I like interviewed them was, well, you know, we used to have this.
Right.
And when they used to have this, that was on the second floor.
Right.
It was like
Yeah.
they're walking in ghost world, for
Yeah.
God's sake.
Right. But it's interesting you talk about the steel mills because I interviewed for the book, from the Beehive book that I did, an artist named Tim Cullen.
Tim's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Right. And-
Well, the thing I was going to say earlier, maybe three signs of like when I moved here,
yeah.
4 now, Tim Cullen. Like when we drove across the bridge
Right.
the first time and I saw that
Yeah.
fucking thing up there, I'm like, huh.
Right.
And
Right.
got to know Tim very well. We canoed, actually.
Right. But he said, I used to go into the steel mills and just, you know, as they were deconstructing them and take hunks of metal to use, and no one would stop me
No.
because no one had thought about that you shouldn't let people go into a steel mill and just take pieces of metal from it, right?
But that's
I mean,
very symbolic of the 90s
Yeah.
in my memory.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
Right.
It was this old abandoned mansion. That's what Pittsburgh was.
Right.
And to those that wanted to stay and fight, you could see, well, if we sanded this wood down and then restained it, and it would be beautiful again.
Right.
And I think that's the track that track that we took. And you can't have lived and to view things today in a non-pragmatic
Right.
manner.
Sure.
Mhm.
And a lot of what politics has become on both sides is more about the emotional part of it than the pragmatic part. And to be on a personal level, it's why I feel separated from politics.
Yeah.
I tend to view this city in a more tangible way with a much more positive attitude
Yeah.
than where people from the far left or the far right
Right.
have that opinion of Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
And I can't be changed because of what I saw
right.
and how hard it was to get to the point where we're at, and how much people like Pat and others played the part from the grassroots level up, and how far we've actually
Yeah.
have been able to come.
The legacy that you've left behind isn't simply these initiatives with the city, right? It's the people. You've fostered a group of people who are now involved in politics and not-for-profits and civic engagement. And what's that like? I mean, how is that?
Did you ever see Camelot?
Yeah,
Did you ever see the last scene?
yeah, of course.
It's exactly what it's
Yeah.
like, where he's telling him about what once was, and it's to a young person. And to be honest with you, some of it was by design. I hired young people in order to have them mentored by people who I went up the ladder with, in order to be able to assure that there would be another generation that would be trained in much of the same way I was. So before I ever ran for city council, I spent 7 years as a chief of staff, as an apprentice, learning it. And then I hired Dan Gilman to be my chief of staff, and he hired Erica Strasberger to be his. And there's a lineage that goes so much further than that. It's, if you look at Mayor O'Connor's administration, the top level positions in the authorities in the city are former administrators from our administration. If you look at County Executive Anna Morato's administration, the top folks, including the county manager and the deputy county manager and the chief of staff, all came from the fifth floor from our administration. If you look at the foundation community, the universities, the hospitals, corporate, you're going to find people spread throughout the city who are much younger than me.
Yeah.
And what I'm very confident of, they're not leaving. And for the next 20 to 30 years, there will be that effect of that team leaning on each other and helping each other as they go up the ladder.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice.
So
Nice.
why don't we take a break
Okay.
and we'll come back and
We'll have
get
some
to
fun.
some of these fun.
All right. We'll be right back. When I need a coffee that actually shows up and a suite that understands commitment, I head out to Potomac Station Coffee. Everything's made in-house, always fresh, and yes, that cinnamon roll, you're eating the whole thing. And the ever-changing latte menu is legendary. Check out Potomac Station Coffee House next to the tracks in Dormont. All right, welcome back to Gen X Pittsburgh. We are joined tonight with Mayor Bill Peduto and his friend Pat Clark, and we have a question for you. It's about wrestling.
No.
No.
Well, okay, we'll do wrestling first. Sure.
We're-
Sure. Sure. So I know that you are a big supporter of, or at least you were when it was around Keystone State Wrestling Alliance, right?
Yeah.
That was, and so I was curious, is it all professional wrestling that you like, or was it specific to Pittsburgh's?
Well, KSWA was amazing, and it was really incredible when it was at the Moose in Lawrenceville, which is now Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was shockingly Pittsburgh, where there were kids that may have been 16, 14, smoking cigarettes with their parents. But the wrestlers themselves are just awesome guys. A lot of them from Morningside, from Polish Hill, from Bloomfield, from Lawrenceville. And there were jello shots, and just everything about it was incredible. And then you'd go down to the bar downstairs, and there would be an Elvis impersonator performing like karaoke. And it was just the perfect quintessential night.
That's John's bar too.
But that is performance art.
Yeah.
That is incredible
Right.
performance art. And they took it very seriously, and
Yeah.
they did such a great job with it that, you know, I was there as a supporter and a fan. And then when I became mayor, that merged into becoming a heel.
Sure.
So I would get up on to the squared circle and start yelling at people and keep booing. Yeah, you know, you're going to get more bike lanes. You're getting more bike lanes. And people would be throwing stuff,
Right.
and I'm like, I'll raise your taxes. So,
I did not know there was like this
Oh, yeah.
wrestling scene.
My,
I
my,
had
my,
no
my
idea
friend
about
Tom
this.
Liturgy. Did you know
yeah,
Tom?
Tom's awesome.
Yeah.
Tom's the one who elevated a mutual friend of ours who we lost, Ron Resitano, who was a commissioner for boxing and other things for the state, and personal friends with Dominic DiNucci and Bruno Sammartino. When we were in second grade, Ronnie and I were the Italian battalion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and during those days, like I said, I grew up with my grandfather in the home, and, you know, he was 5'7", 155 pounds, but Saturday afternoons watching Bruno Sammartino wrestling, he, you know, he tell me, that's the strongest man in the world.
Right.
He's a number one, Bruno.
Right.
And I'd sit there with him and we'd watch, and I remember taking him and my buddy and my grandfather's friend, Mr. Musamelli, to Civic Arena to see Larry Zabisco.
Yeah, ask you
During
about
the
Larry.
same-
How do you feel about Larry Zabisco?
Well, he
as a
became a,
Pittsburgher.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Right.
Like, how do you feel about it?
well, I mean, he broke Bruno's heart.
Yes, he did.
It was just incredible memories of childhood. All my friends were into it. It was Superstar Billy Graham, what was the name? Snuka.
Jimmy Snuka.
Jimmy
Yeah.
Snuka.
Right.
Yeah, Superfly.
Right.
I mean, it was that era in the coming off of the Pittsburgh era to
Right.
the WWF.
Right.
What was the local promotion called here? Because it was big time professional wrestling in Michigan.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was on Channel 11.
Right. So
That was Chili Billy's thing.
Yeah.
it was, but and there was Hat Pin Mary. I don't know if you know that, but that's where she
Don't know
developed
about
here in
Hat Pin
Pittsburgh. She used to. This is in the '60s. She had a hat pin that when wrestlers she didn't like would come by, she would stick them. And
Yeah.
originally she was just a fan.
Is that Ringside Rosie? Or maybe
No, this was Hat Pin
Okay.
Mary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it became such a thing that they made her part of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ringside Rosie was too.
Okay.
With
Yeah.
Bill Cardell.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you guys remember Mitch Cates. He ran for city council
I
against Lennon Bodak.
Okay.
But he wrestled.
He was a giant of a man.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was trained by Killer Kowalski
Yeah.
up in New England
Yeah.
and outside of Boston.
Yeah.
So when he ran for city council, I supported him, and we had pasta and pierogies fundraiser at Iron City Brewery with Killer Kowalski and
Oh,
Bruno
wow.
Sammartino.
And Bruno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Brought tears
Yeah.
to his eyes. You could see it.
Well, yeah, they hadn't seen each other
Just
for
like-
a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, just like
Wow.
Sidney
And I
Crosby.
have a picture with Killer Kowalski choking me. And
Oh, wow.
Bruno and Mitch standing
Wow.
there.
My longtime, like God bless him, friend. He's now administrative judge at working for that Jagoff Kennedy in D.C. But wonderful guy, longtime professional wrestling fan. We've gone to so many matches; it's insane. But he one of the greatest, two of the greatest events in his professional wrestling following career were that banquet when he came up
Yeah.
from DC to attend that. It blew his mind.
Yeah.
And we went to see ECW out in Ross
Oh,
River.
yeah. Yeah.
They had a bar until the roof collapsed. They had a bar where you could go to a wrestling match, sit at the bar, and watch the action. And if you didn't leave, the wrestlers, other than the ham and eggers, would come up and drink with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It was one of the most
Yeah.
moving experiences of my life.
Can we just ask you, what was it like being on Undercover Boss? Were
say,
you
yeah.
ready to hear what your, like, the employees were really going to say to you? Like what?
So reality TV is not reality. Let's start with that. So
No.
I got the random phone call. They called my communications office and they said, would you like to be on the show? And what they didn't say is there was a 3-part interview series.
Right.
Where they had found stuff that was on YouTube that they liked with about a dozen mayors. So they started with that. Then they did interviews by the internet, and then the final interviews were in person. And so I went through that process, and I was selected to be on it. And what they do is they ship you out. So I was out at the DoubleTree off the Parkway West, Green Tree.
Right.
And I wasn't allowed, I was with my girlfriend at the time. I wasn't allowed to see her. I wasn't allowed to see my family. They didn't want me talking to my family or her. They wanted everything. And basically I would get up at 5 a.m. and they would do that beard thing and the rest for 2 hours. And then they would put whatever I was going to wear that day and ship me off, and you film, and then you sit there and you wait for an hour and a half, then you film and I said, hey guys, I saw a job, so I can be back by 5, and they never got me back by 5. It was like 6:30 or whatever. So I'd work for like 3 more hours at the hotel and then go to sleep for 6 hours, get up for like 2 weeks.
That was 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was over a week. It was like I can't even recall how long, but it was.
What was the press? What was the story to the general public?
Where was that?
Yeah, where were you?
I can't remember. I think that we had done it so
The
that there
Dakotas?
were certain times or certain days where I was public, and so it never really became a thing. I guess it was 2 weekends plus 5 days.
Yeah.
Did
So it started
really like the whole showbiz thing? Did it really, like some people, it ropes them right in,
Oh God, no, the entire opposite. At one time, the producer came to me and he said, and I won't use her name, but why is my director crying? And I just explained that Californians are passive aggressive and Pittsburghers are passive and aggressive. And I really didn't appreciate like what she was asking me, because what they'll do is they'll coach you.
Right.
It's like, so when they said that, and it said that, they weren't able to get the money they had gotten before, didn't that make you feel how to make you feel and then film you?
Right.
And I'd be like, I'm fine with it. They were stealing money before,
Yeah.
and now they're not stealing money. Okay, well, let me ask you, take that part out. Now, if you're a human and you have this person telling you that they don't have money they used to have and they have children,
Right.
how do you respond? I just told you how I respond. They don't steal money. So they everything is, and they want to coax all the answers.
Right.
And the other thing they did is they sabotage. So, when I was cutting down trees, the chainsaw was bent so that it would not be able. And so the other guy gets his chainsaw and cuts right through it. And I'm like going crazy. And there were some other things that they sabotaged, but you'll notice when you see it, like the CEO will drive the forklift into a wall.
Yes.
And it's always like to make you the foil.
Right.
And so between
You're the man.
all of that,
You're the man.
no, I
Just
was.
setting up to be the man. That's
Yeah.
what they're doing.
One thing we did do is we worked with Visit Pittsburgh, and we made it mandatory that any of the background shots we were in charge of, and we used beauty shots of Pittsburgh. So if you ever notice, it's the beautiful skyline, and there's like a swan on the river.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like.
B-roll. That's everything.
Yeah, then we put the swan back in the cage. So it's, yeah.
Wow.
But no, we used it so that everything for B-roll was beautiful shots of Pittsburgh.
Right.
Nice.
Okay.
Nice.
So we do something at the end of the show where we ask our guests the same 10 questions. And they're kind of rapid fire. They're not hard. there's not a lot of thought to this, but we would love to do it with you. Valerie, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll start and you both can answer, okay?
Yeah.
All right. Iron City or Rolling Rock?
Iron City,
Iron City,
Three Rivers or Heinz Field?
Three Rivers,
Three Rivers,
Favorite alternative bands?
The Breeders.
Oh,
Oh, nice.
we haven't had that one before.
I have, God, why can't I think of her name?
Yeah.
same deal.
No,
No.
Kelly.
Kelly, that's
Yes,
right.
right,
I
Kelly.
got Kelly's phone number.
Well, good for you.
Cool.
Replacements.
Oh, the replacements, that's mine.
Okay.
They fucked everything.
Yeah. Turner's or Schneider's?
Turner's.
Turners.
Okay.
Favorite 90s movie?
Or Gen X. You can stretch it out to the 80s if you want.
So probably I'm going more boomer in my brain right now, and I'm going Deer Hunter.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with, God bless her, Catherine O'Hara, John Candy. I'm going with Home Alone. Like, I don't like the movie, but that scene, and the reason it really comes to mind is because I was listening to Saturday Polka on the AM radio last weekend. God damn if they didn't play that clip with
Yeah.
John Candy.
Right.
It was awesome. Yes, that.
Donzi's and Chauncey's or Metropole and Rosebud?
I'm more Metropole, Rosebud.
Yeah.
Many more happy memories.
Sure. I think we can all agree on that.
Donzi, down a strip.
Yeah.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes.
I think it's a police state movie. Sorry, but every movie is now. So.
Nirvana or Pearl Jam?
Nirvana.
Nirvana.
Which character from The Breakfast Club can you relate to most?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really think that I
No
do.
idea.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was the wrong.
Well, that's that 1 year, I guess.
Yeah, that 1 year last year.
Right. Southside Beehive or Oakland Beehive?
Outside.
Yeah, I have to go Oakland because it was my introduction.
Wow. I think you're only the second person that said
Yeah.
Oakland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mayor.
Yeah.
This has been such a good time. I really appreciate you taking the opportunity.
I can't
Thank
wait
you.
to see how it gets edited.
Thank you.
Hosts for the Gen X Pittsburgh Podcast are David Rulo and Valerie Christoffel. Executive producer, David Rulo. Producer and graphic design, Kimberly Rulo. Producer, Valerie Christoffel. Video production and editor, Brent Isaac. Music by Neostem. Sponsored by Potomac Station Coffee House and Con Alma.